Okay, I have a really awesome tape repair we're going to do today. This is an evening with Diana Ross. And I want to do this one, first of all, because there's something broken on the tape that I'm going to show you how to fix it the hard way and the easy way. And also, this is an unusual tape for some other reasons that I want to talk to you about. But first of all, Diana Ross, I mean, she was just awesome. And this came out, I think, in about 1977. And this was a live album. And of course, Diana Ross was with the Supremes back in the 60s. And somewhere around 1970, she went off and did her own solo thing, which led to, this was part of her solo career, although she did do some Supremes songs on this thing. And, I think the first time I ever became aware of Diana Ross was when the movie The Wiz came out. And I don't know why I remember that. It was, 77, 78, and I was a very little kid, but it was such a big deal. And there was this one scene in The Wiz, this iconic moment, where she's Dorothy, of course, and Michael Jackson played the Scarecrow, and the two of them on the yellow brick road walking toward the city, but Michael Jackson's dancing and she's kind of dancing, and they're singing Ease On Down the Road. And it's such an iconic scene, and it's so cool. Anyway, Diana Ross, that's probably the first time I ever heard of her. But what makes this tape particularly interesting, and it's different than a lot of the things that we show here, is that this is an example of a cassette tape that was actually created from a double album. So if you would have bought this as a record in the store, you would have had two records. Side A, side B, of record one, and then record two would have side A, side B. And a lot of times what they do is they'd say side 1, 2, 3, 4, or side A, B, C, D. But in this case, what they did was they actually got all of side A, or all of the first record on side A of the tape, and all of the second record on side B of the tape. And I'll show you that here. When you look at the cassette itself, you'll see that the entire track list, now you wouldn't know unless you had the record, but all these songs are crammed into one side, and you flip it over and look at all that stuff that's crammed into, 1977, that's crammed into side two. It's unbelievable. Now, the way they did this, because you look at that and you go, well, there was obviously more tape in there, right? I mean, but it doesn't look too full. The interesting thing that they would do, and they would just simply, this had to be just a money-saving measure, was rather than putting it as a double cassette set, which is probably what they should have done, but in order to save money, they crammed it all on one tape. And what they do is they literally make the tape itself thinner. That's really all you can do. You can only cram so much tape into one of these little shells. And so it became so thin that it really it was never going to last. And of course, it wasn't going to have the same kind of quality that something that was a little bit thicker and had more oxide on it was going to. And so they would sacrifice that in order to, I guess, save money and cram it all onto one of these little tapes. Now and so I just wanted to show you that this is an example of a double album where it should have been two tapes. If you bought it on a record, it would have been two records. But in this case, they crammed it all into one. Hey, hold on for just a second. We'll get right back to the video. But if you like this stuff, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, leave any comments. We'd love to hear from you, and we really, really appreciate it. Anyway, with that, back to the video. And this is an example. When you go back in the 1970s, a lot of times, a lot of the tapes that we show you here, the imprinting of the song list is right on the plastic itself. But this is one of those where they actually have a little sheet glued on there, and you can see that over time they start to peel off a little bit because it's just adhesive. We will a lot of times get tapes in the studio where these things just fall off, and like a lot of adhesives. If you've seen a piece of Scotch tape, for example, if you pulled an old box out of your attic and you saw something that had some Scotch tape on it, you'll see that the tape just kind of flakes off. Because if it sits long enough in the wrong environment, it just crumbles and the adhesive just breaks down. And you can just kind of see it starting here, although it's actually, this is done pretty well for as old it is. You can see the the colors change, and you can also see that the tape color would have been more of a white when it first came out, and just over time, the different polymers of plastic will just get more and more yellow, which means they kind of get more and more brittle too. And we'll see if that's the case here, because we're going to actually break this thing open and show you what it looks like on the inside. And this particular tape, just by the way, one of the interesting things about this, of course, she was not a songwriter, she was just a singer and a performer. And some of the songs that she did on here that were not hers, that I thought was so interesting about this particular tape, Harry Nilsson did kind of a concept album that was called The Point. And if you've never heard it, it's so good and it's so interesting. And she actually does a few songs from The Point on this tape. Here it is right here. So it actually says The Point, Everybody's Got 'Em, Me and My Arrow, Lifeline, Everybody's Got 'Em reprise. And it was just kind of interesting that she did that she just recorded those songs on here. Again, because it's this Harry Nilsson music, and it was just so cool. His record, The Point. The other thing, of course, the very, very last song on side 2, Ain't No Mountain High Enough, Ashford and Simpson song. I think she wasn't the first one to record this, I don't think, but she was the one, she really, really put it on the map. I mean, I think that was her solo first number one song. Anyway, so that's the final song on side 2, or if you had the record, it would have been the last song on side 4. So An Evening with Diana Ross. Now, let me show you what's wrong with this tape. This tape has a very common problem that we see here in the studio. Now, where I am right now, we're in the Audio Mover studio. Audio Mover, what we do is we take people's old audio and videotapes and turn them into digital. Now, we don't do tapes like this. This is copyrighted. But we get tapes sent in from all over the country, people that have recorded their piano recitals and birthday parties and interviews with their grandparents. You'd be amazed. And we're also really well known in the industry for doing large quantities of tapes. For example, we get projects sent in from government agencies and churches. The biggest project we ever did, believe it or not, we did a project where we converted 115,000 cassette tapes for one organization. So we're really well known in the industry for that. Even though if you did want to send stuff, you can send one tape in, and we do that kind of thing all the time. But this is the number one thing that we find with cassette tapes that get sent into the studios. They're missing this little thing right here, and I'm going to show you. It's called a pressure pad, and it's right underneath this red stuff is what's called leader tape. There's nothing recorded on it. It's just plastic, and it connects to the audio tape. But you'll see right there that there's this little copper mount, and then right there's supposed to be kind of a little piece of kind of felt, and it's supposed to look kind of like that. It's supposed to have a little piece of felt like that, but this has fallen off. And when it falls off, the sound is poor. And the reason is, the way a tape player works, when you push play on the tape player, there's this little thing called a head that goes up and it pushes inside and it touches the tape. Well, there's supposed to be that little piece of felt, because the idea is that it kind of sandwiches the tape in between the head and this little thing, and that's what gives it a nice solid connection between the head and the tape. When that pad is missing, the connection isn't what it's supposed to be, and the sound quality will be reduced. Now, normally, when we get to every tape that comes in the studio, the very, very first thing we'll look for is that, because it's missing so often. And a lot of times, if the tape is in a case, something like this, we'll pull it out, we'll see that it's missing, and a lot of times it's just sitting right in there. And then we'll just pull it out, and you can just glue it back on. And just use Elmer's glue or something like that. And that's the easy way to fix this. And we'll just glue it back on. If it's not in there, which this one is not, then a lot of times it'll actually be kind of jammed down underneath this little piece of copper. But in this case, it's not there either. So it's possible that whoever owned this tape previously I just bought this at a local record store because we find ones that are broken just so we can come show you make these videos for you. Whoever owned this before probably put it in a tape player and the thing just fell out and was lost in the tape player forever. And so what you can do, if you have this problem, all you really need to do again is just get a little bit of Elmer's glue and glue a new one on there. Where do you get a new one? Just go find an old cassette tape and take this little thing out. You can actually just grab with some pliers and just pull it out, and then just tear that one off, and then just glue it on. I mean, it's really that simple, and it'll work fine. For the most part, these things are all interchangeable. Now, that's the easy way to do it, and just glue it and let it sit for an hour or whatever till the glue kind of sets up, and then play it, and it'll work fine, and that's all you need to do. But I'm going to show you the hard way to do this, because in some cases, we have to open up these things to actually get in and work on the tape. And so I'm just going to show you how to do that and show you how these entire mounts are interchangeable. And I've never opened this up, but I can almost guarantee you that this one that I pulled off of an old TDK or something like that, we have a whole box full of these things just for these repairs, because this happens so often, that it'll just fit in here, and these little parts and pieces can be exchanged. So I'm going to show you how to open this up, how to get in here. Now, the first thing that makes this challenging on a tape like this is, again, as a cost-saving measure, when these things were made by a record company, they would seal the tape shut so you couldn't get into it. And you'll see that there's kind of a seam right there, there's a seam right there, there's a seam right there. And a lot of tapes that you would buy, blank tapes like a TDK or a Maxell or something like that, would have screws. And they'd have 4 screws, 1, 2, 3, 4 on the corners, and then they'd have one right in here. And so they'd have 5 screws total, and you can just remove the screws, lift it off, and do whatever you need to do. This one's not like that, obviously. And so we do get a lot of these types of tapes, though, that are sealed shut. And then when we have to open them up, I'm just going to show you kind of what we do and how we get into this. Now, the nice thing about this, again, because these are so interchangeable, if as we break it open, I don't know what's going to happen. Most of the time, we're able to get in without too much trouble and then put it back together. But sometimes it just falls to pieces, or it rips and tears, and we just need, it doesn't really matter. You can take the spools with the tape out and just set it in another shell, and it will work fine. So these are, for all intents and purposes, it's all universal. So we are careful as we open it up, mainly to not damage the audio tape. But anyway, again, a lot of even if you destroy the shell, you can still make this work. Now, if you can, when you're doing a repair, rewind it all the way to one side or the other. Now, a lot of times when you open it up, you can't, because the tape has been severed somewhere. The reason we do that is that it makes it a little easier if you have all the oxide kind of on one side to avoid it when you're breaking the thing open. You just kind of want to avoid it with your screwdriver for a couple different reasons. You don't want to jam the screwdriver in there and then like hurt it, although it's really hard to hurt this stuff. It's very robust. Also, the other thing that's important is you don't want to use screwdrivers that are magnetized when you work on these, because the oxide tape, it's that's on here, it's ferric oxide. I think that's what this one would be. The audio on there is magnetic, and rubbing a magnet over it can actually damage the audio. And so you want to use screwdrivers that aren't magnetized, just because, I mean, the chances that I would destroy it with a really, really weak magnet on a screwdriver is pretty low. But again, having worked in recording studios so much of my life and been yelled at so many times for getting tapes too close to speakers and things, I'm very cognizant of that, and I try to be careful about it. So the way we do this is we start off with these little holes right here. All cassette tapes are going to have these little holes. And if it's not a hole, there's going to be a little tab. And all you have to do is just break the tab out. and then you'll have these holes. What these are write protect holes. I've got videos explaining this elsewhere. Basically, all that does is it when these are covered, it just keeps you from recording on, it allows you to record on it. When you break the tabs out, you can no longer record on the tape unless you put, like you can actually put some Scotch tape over those holes, and then you can record on this tape like any other tape. So then we use these spots as kind of a wedge. And again, I don't know what's going to happen because every one of these tapes, every one we do is always a little bit different. But what we're hoping is that we'll be able to wedge this open, we'll break it along these seams, and then just be able to open it up. That's the idea here. So the first thing I usually do, is do that. Just kind of bend it a little bit and see if we can just crack the seams just a little bit to get it started. Just give it, there you can hear a little bit. And I'm also cognizant here of the fact that this is pretty old. And as these tapes yellow, they get brittle. And it's really easy. I actually have another video that we did a few days ago where big chunks of this thing just start flying off everywhere when I did that because they are so brittle. So anyway, I'm going to put, look at that. See, that's the idea. We want to get that screwdriver in there, and then we're going to kind of break it apart. Now you'll see when I did that right there how it cracked down the side. Again, this is brittle plastic. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this screwdriver, the flathead now, and we're going to try to just kind of run it through here. And you'll see we're going to, again, try to keep the screwdriver away from the tape, but this is really, really brittle. And the tape's on this side, so I'm being kind of careful not to get the screwdriver in to touch it so I don't accidentally damage it somehow. So I'm just kind of prying it open on that side. I'm going to pry it open on this side now. And you'll see that it's kind of tearing down the side. So far it's not bad enough that we can't close it back. Oh yeah, it might be. That's not supposed to be that way. We may have to put this in other housing. And I'll show you that too. It's really not a big deal. But this is, again, the tape is so brittle. You can see that it's just, oh my goodness. Yeah, this is so old, and this tape is the plastic is so brittle. And like I said, it's really not a big deal. There we go. We don't want it to break in those spots like this, because that's going to be really, we can't, this is kind of a, it's, like I said, this is just kind of what happens sometimes. And so we opened this up to show you how to replace this pad. But again, like I said, when this stuff gets so yellow, it just cracks so easily. I mean, look at that. It's just the brittle nature of these of plastic. It's the way these polymers work. So what I'm going to do, and it looks like a mess, but it's really not a big deal. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab another cassette. But let me show you what's going on in here just so you can kind of see it first of all. It's usually not this big a mess, but again, this thing was put together, when they print this back in, I think, 77, when this cassette was made. So it's been around for, close to 50 years. So this thing's old. Now, a couple different things here. This right here, you'll see that there's one on this side and there's also one on this side. What this does is it basically keeps the oxide from rubbing on the plastic in here. So this is very low friction, and you can see kind of the wheel right there where this is rubbed on it. And if you've watched any other videos, this is produced by a record company, and this is about as cheaply made as these things get. And the other way you can tell is that on a lot of tapes, the sheet, this gasket, I've heard it called a slip sheet before, usually has some embossing in it, which helps this reel spool up smoothly, which clearly this one, they're never perfectly smooth, but this one's really not smooth at all. And it's usually embossed a little bit, kind of pushing up and down, and what that does is as this spools back on the reel, it just keeps it really smooth. And this one, they don't even have that. And it may be that, I'm not sure when the embossing really started on cassette tapes, but and I can't be 100% sure when this particular one was printed, when this particular tape was made, but this goes back a ways. And the embossing became kind of a normal thing in a lot of cassette tapes. And inside here, you'll see this, here's our little pad, the little pressure pad, or what was supposed to be the pressure pad, and it's missing on this. But you'll see, let me see if I can flip this over, that it's pretty much identical to this one that I pulled out of that other tape deck. Hopefully you can see that there. Yeah. So if we were going to keep this, all you'd have to do is just replace it in that spot right there. And as I said, these things are interchangeable. There, see, it fits in there just fine. So if we were going to save this case, yeah, we'd never be able to get this back together. Then we would just put that in there like that. And then there's also this little thing. If you've never seen one of these before, this is kind of a little magnetic shield, and they come out too. And what that is when the tape head, especially the record head and erase head, go in here to play the tape, the tape runs across and it pushes on it. There's another little thing that sits next to it, usually called an erase head, and when you're recording on a tape, it actually erases the tape as it records onto it, so that whatever was on there before is gone. And so this little magnetic shield kind of keeps this little magnetic field that's being generated right here, keeps it from damaging, from shooting up here and damaging all that tape. That's fundamentally the point. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to do this I'm going to go grab another, I didn't have one prepared. I'm going to go grab another housing to show you what we would do in a case like this where the tape can't be, where we have to replace the housing, and just show you how really simple this is. So this right here is it's a Maxell XL2 100. Basically, it's just just a typical cassette tape, and like a lot of higher end tapes, like this was a little bit of a nicer tape. It'll have the screws, which I think I described before, and you'll see that there's 1, 2, 3, 4, and then a fifth one right there. And then this is how simple this process is. So if you needed to do something like this, and this is the kind of stuff that we would do if you have a tape that comes in and we have to go through a process like this, is you simply get a tape that has that you can get the screws, where you can take the screws out. And we actually have boxes and boxes of these things for this purpose. We actually have a lot of our clients in the past who have sent us in thousands and thousands of tapes. They will frequently say, hey, we don't want the tapes back, you can just throw them away. And then what we'll do is say, hey, do you mind if we scavenge pieces out of them? Because we have a lot of clients that send things in that need pieces and parts. And they're like, of course. So thank you to all of our clients that have done this before. And so then what we do is we'll take the tapes. This isn't one of them, but we'll take the tapes that they leave with us. We'll take the tape out, and then we just have these shells that then we can just take the other things and put them in. So here you can see this one has that little sheet right there, and I'm going to move it off to the side. But this is what's sitting inside that other tape, and it's really this simple. I mean, you take that out like that, and you take this and put it in there, and that's it. Now we've got this little problem here that we're going to have to do something about this, of course, because we've got that. Try not to damage myself in the process. We've got to break this. There we go. Get that wheel out of there. I should be able to. Oh, that post is stuck there too. Isn't this fun? We get to do this all the time. Okay, got a little mess going on here. So what we would do And by the way, if you're doing something like this, wash your hands really, really well, because you are going to handle the tape a little bit. So we're just kind of gonna, you see I'm kind of holding it down because this tape is so flimsy. You can actually see how it's even warped a little bit over time, just based on how it's been stored, where it's been sitting, and it just does that. That little fold there might have been from us moving this around, but you'll see that it's very normal for these things to just start bending, folding, or maybe that's the wrong way to put it. It kind of starts to warp. That's a better way to put it, because again, it's just kind of a polymer, and just over time it just warps. And so the tape, and that's one of the reasons this pressure pad is so important, because it helps, even with the tape being a little bit warped, it helps keep it really solid. So I'm going to get this one already had the pressure pad in it, and it's already in good shape. So I'm just making sure that's sitting in there correctly. There we go. And then that wheel, you'll see these different parts. There are these two wheels that spin freely, one on each side. The tape itself goes around this post right there, around the wheel, across that pad, around this wheel, around that post, and over onto that spool. Yeah, it's interesting. You can kind of see, it's hard to tell if you can see it in the camera, but these little spools, especially this one, is getting brittle too. It's yellowing. It's just the way it goes with plastic over time. As you maybe realize, you probably have things in your life that are plastic, that are old, that used to be white, and now they're yellow. It is the nature of many polymers of plastic that's just what's going to happen. So now what we're going to do is we're just going to kind of try to get it fed along the path. And like I said, part of that thing is it'll warp. And I have a feeling if we spooled through this tape, you'd see a bunch of little bends and folds through there. This one is interesting because that little sheet, that little gasket I was talking about, is clear. You can still see that it's there. And on this other side, oh shoot, I just bumped all the, you can see it's warped, you can see there too. You can also see that this one has some of that embossing that I was talking about. And what that embossing does, again, the idea is to hold it solid against the tape to help it spool up smoothly. So anyway, that's basically the concept, and you can see that it fits in there just fine. We'll put this right over the top of it again, and then we'll take our screws. I think one of them I just bumped on the ground. Well, this will be okay. We're probably never going to play this tape ever again anyway, but we got this just to kind of show you how this works. So we're going to put these screws in, and there's 3. We have a whole box of these screws too, just because. And if something like this ever happened with a tape that you sent in, if you sent it, that one didn't spool it, there you go. See if I can see it readily. I don't see it. I'm pretty sure I dropped it. Anyway, it'll be okay. So if this were to happen to one of your tapes, rarely does it end up in a big pile of pieces like this. Well, I kind of broke it a little extra just for fun. But what we would normally do then is we'd put some sort of sticker on there so you knew what was what, and then we would attach this with a rubber band or something so you'd know that this was actually this. Most of the time when people are sending things in, as I said a minute ago, they're never intending to ever play them again anyway. So it's really not really a big deal, because our goal is to basically get the thing working and playing one time so we can get it digitized. And as I said, we do these by the thousands for organizations, and then of course individuals send them in from all over the country. Not these copyrighted tapes. That's not what we don't do those, but we get regular cassette tapes sent in all the time, every day, that we digitize for people in here. And sometimes we have to do something similar to what you just saw right here, where we have to break the tape open and make some sort of a repair to get it to work again. And every once in a while, this happens, where you have a tape that is just so brittle, and that as we try to break into it, it just collapses. And as I said, it's really not a big deal. You can take this right now and go play it, throw it in your car, and it'll work fine. You won't know the difference. So Diana Ross, An Evening with Diana Ross lives to play another day. And so anyway, hey, I hope you enjoy this stuff. Of course, like the video, follow the channel, share this with anybody, leave any comments or questions you have. And with that, of course, have yourself a fantastic day.